Hey cousins, it's your good cousin Meva Mayat. If you're new to my content or if this video found you on this channel, I like to talk about all things that assist melanin people with being melanated without apology. That just simply means learning to love ourselves and realizing that we owe nobody anything. Melanin people, we do not love ourselves, and it has to do a lot with events such as lynching, what we're going to talk about today. And even though it happened almost 200 years ago, it still plays a detrimental part on the trauma and the dysfunction in the melanin community. Okay? So, at any time, if you find yourself resonating with anything that I'm talking about, don't hesitate to subscribe and click the thumbs up button. And if you're really feeling bold, go ahead and share the video, because we all can use some elevation, motivation, and education so that we can be melanated without apology. So, getting into the video, we're talking about lynching and the psychological and spiritual effects that it has on the melanin community today. Why should you care? Because this period of time is one of the primary reasons why the melanin community is dysfunctional today. This period in time destroyed melanin people mentally, spiritually, and physically, economically, politically, all right? In so many areas. This period in time traumatized the melanin community. So we're dealing with a lot of trauma because of the events that happened during this period of time. So this person you see in front of you, his name is Colonial Charles Lynch, okay? We're about to talk about the origins of lynching and get into the truth and the breakdown of things that they don't teach in school, all right? Because in school, it's a lot of fluff. It's a lot of confusion, all right? It's miseducation out here today because they don't really want you to activate, all right? If you knew, about this topic in depth, then you would probably not be so friendly with your adversaries. You wouldn't be so kumbaya with everybody. They don't want you pointing the finger. White America can't take accountability for the things that their ancestors have done that pretty much still affects not only us but them as well to this day. And so let's talk about it. All right, let's talk about it. Colonial Charles Lynch, 17th century, the term lynch. All right. If you hear some paper in the background, it's just me reading from my notes. Colonial Charles Lynch, he was a legislative of Virginia. All right. He was also a lieutenant of the military. This was during the time where the Americas was colonies. All right. So the Neanderthals were colonizing the Americas. What does colonizing mean? It is simply to establish dominance over a people that is already present in and on land. Okay? So he is primarily the reason we have the word lynch, which was first acknowledged as a lynch law. A lynch law was pretty much taking the punishment of someone into your own hands. So today, if somebody breaks the law, you go through the courts so that they can give you a trial and assess your punishment accordingly. What the lynch law did was exclude the law and the individual took matters into their own hands. Pretty much Colonel Charles Lynch. All right, it was a lynch law. It had nothing to do with racism. It had nothing to do with the color of anyone's skin. All right, and y'all, I'm just breaking this down, touching on we're just wrapping all this up. You can read it yourself. All right, it breaks down the origins of lynching. I'm just trying to give you that brief run through so we won't be here all day, and that your history can be simplified and you can understand and understand. All right, because when history is taught to us, it's not taught to us honestly, and a lot of us are aware of that. And so when we have some clarity on the events that happened in the past that still affects us today, it will help you with your healing, which help you heal your trauma. It'll help you heal and activate and elevate. So getting back to it, lynching had nothing to do with racism. Now this was also the time, like I said, the Americas were colonized, and so Britain owned the colonies. So who was Charles Lynch, quote unquote, applying the lynch law to? His British adversaries, his ops. All right, the British and the American colonies started to beef because the colonies did not want to be controlled by Great Britain anymore, because Great Britain started taxing. So Colonel Charles, he was a rebel. He was pretty much a rebel. And so the British was like, since y'all trying to go against us, and the colonies had cut off they connect with Great Britain was like, we about to go to war. So it was a war. The Great Britain ops ran up on Charles Lynch, and he caught him. And instead of taking them through a proper trial, like taking them through the courts and all of that, he was like, forget that. I'm going to handle this my way. And what did he do? He tied them to a tree on his plantation, and he would whip them. He would take their land, and then he would make them fight in the American war. All right. So these were his British ops. They were on his British side, but he would make them fight on the American side in the war. So that was their punishment. So he gave them his own punishment instead of the way it was supposed to be through the law. Okay, so that is where the term lynching comes from. And if you read this, you will learn, and it's other sites, okay, where you can learn about the origins of lynching. This one happens to go through the Avoca Museum, which is a museum that's located exactly on this man's plantation. All right. So I highly advise all my cousins out there to do your own research. But look, your good cousin Mother Mayat already did the research for you. So I'm here to share what I learned. So yeah. So he pretty much handled the law. He took the law into his own hands. Just like if somebody was to break into your house and you did what you had to do to handle it and you didn't call the police. That's the same thing he did, and that was considered the lynch law. Now, we're told, lynching comes from Willie Lynch. Now, Willie Lynch was his cousin. All right, Willie Lynch was Charles Lynch's cousin. But before Willie Lynch was their great ancestor, Fitzstephen Lynch. So Fitzstephen Lynch, he was also a legislative, but he was a legislative in Ireland. And what he was known for was he hung his son for murdering someone. And so he pretty much put the law above his own blood and flesh. So that's a story that is also told of how the term lynching may have derived. But this story about Colonel Charles Lynch holds the most weight. And then there's also the story about Willie Lynch and the term deriving from him, but we'll get to Willie Lynch furthermore as we move along. All right, so we just talked about the origins and the history of where the term lynching derived from and how it was proposed in the beginning. All right, not as racist. There was no racism involved. Okay, and it was an act of punishment that was outside of the law. Just want to make that clear as we move along. And so this was in the 17th century. Now, fast forward to the 19th century. From 1870 to 1950, we're now in the Reconstruction era. Okay, so we just left the 17th century where pretty much the Americas were being colonized. All right, melanin people at this time was building the Americas. All right, we were building the Americas physically and cultivating the land, sharecropping. And so now a war had broke out between the northern colonies and the southern colonies, the North and the South. We're going to talk about the Civil War. This was the Civil War. Now we're going to touch a little bit on this. Go and do your research about the Civil War. I know for me, when we were learning the Civil War, it was a little difficult for me to kind of digest because I feel like it was just taught to me weird. Like it didn't make no sense. And then once I started listening to my elders break it down, I pretty much learned it in like a couple minutes. It was, and so as melanin people, like, we don't really listen in school because none of this resonates with us because it's not taught properly. They either exclude us completely, or when they do talk about us and our ancestors, it's always in a negative light. And so we just disassociate ourselves completely. But the Civil War was about melanin people. Just like everything is usually about melanin people. So the Civil War was pretty much the North and the South were beefing, and the North was like trying to let the South know, like, look, we found a new way to make money. All right, so we pretty much don't need slavery anymore from melanin people. And the South was like, what? That's crazy. Like, they're gonna be what? Like, they wasn't rocking. So the North and them, they went to war. So they went to war, and the South was like, all right, so if we don't need them, like, if we're not gonna have slavery anymore, what's gonna happen to them? Like, where they gonna go? What they gonna do? And so the North, like, they just about to start being a part of what's being built. They about to be citizens. They about to be out here. And so once melanin people got off of the plantation, once melanin people quote unquote joined society, and I say quote unquote because there was still like segregation and laws imposed, that's your constitution and stuff like that, and all these bills of rights and all that still said that we weren't pretty much people and stuff like that. But you're no longer on the plantation at this point, and you're now a part of society. So the Neanderthals are doing their thing over there, and then the melanin people are doing their things over here. And what you're over here doing is you're building schools, you are learning, you are running for government, like, you're being great, pretty much. A little too great. All right? You out here thriving. You're starting businesses. And not only are you starting businesses, you're starting successful businesses. And your business are now outdoing the Neanderthals' businesses. And so the Neanderthals got jealous. they felt intimidated, and they felt like they were losing power. If you know anything about white America, you know they don't share power. And so they felt like they were losing power. And so that's when they had to let melanin people know that there's no way that you ignorant no, there's no way that you ignorant Negroes are going to hop your ass off the plantation and then start thinking you gonna run shit. Excuse my French, but that's how they looked at us, and they still do. And so they like, what? You just came off the plantation, now you out here starting businesses and you think you better? You out here smart, going to school, being great? Oh no. So they had to do something about that. Now this is where Willie Lynch come in, because it said that his methods were how lynching started. Well, that's controversial, and that's not really set in stone, because Willie Lynch actually did not advocate lynching in the way that it started to come about. All right, the Neanderthals started killing us, and so of course when we think about lynching, we think rope around a neck hanging from a tree. And so Willie Lynch didn't even like really advocate for that, because his methods of getting melanated people to get in line or whatever, or to stay in line, his methods were to turn them against one another. And you have the Willie Lynch letters. You could get the book, The Willie Lynch Letter, and it'll let you know about pretty much what he was about. See, the Willie Lynch Letter and the Making of a Slave. He pretty much just said turn them against each other. He didn't even really agree with what was taking place in the South. And so that's why it's controversial, because he was actually called to Virginia. He was in the West Indies, and he got called to Virginia when melanated people were on the plantations, and he was called to get them to get in line if they ever got out of line. And so how did all the hanging and stuff like that come into place? That's something we gotta ask white America. It came into place because they was hating, they were jealous, and they didn't want to lose their power. And so the KKK, which we know them as today, but back then they had so many names. Like, they're the Knights of Templars, if I'm saying that right. I think I'm Knights of Templar. They were also known as a lot of things. They was known as I'm tripping. They were known as the red they was known as the red okay, hold on. I'm trying to find what they was known as. Now I got all these freaking notes. I know y'all had all these papers. It's up here. They were known as the I got it. They were known as the Red Shirt Band. I just didn't want to say it wrong. All right, I'm sorry. I didn't want to say it wrong. They were known as the Red Shirt Band. They were known as the Midnight Raiders, the Knights of the Golden Circle. Like I said, the Knights of Templar. All that was them. All right, it gets deep with them. All right, they had to get the power that they felt they lost back. All right, their whole goal was to defend white power. So they started unaliving melanated people. And I mean, they were going so hard. Okay? Y'all familiar with it. Y'all familiar with what was happening. And we're going to get into it. All right? It may get a little sensitive. You may see some things that, I guess trigger warning. But we got to learn how to stomach a lot of stuff because we've been through so much. All right. We've been through so much, and you're being sacrificed today because of events like what we're talking about right now. And so that's, we're gonna get into the spiritual part. That's more of the spiritual aspect of what this time period has done to our people today. And so yes, the KKK was hanging our people from ropes, from trees, light poles, all types of things. Lynching didn't even just fall in a category of ropes around the neck. Okay, this new type of lynching that was happening, they would shoot you, they was setting you on fire, they was wilding, all to scare melanin people. They wanted to put fear in your heart. They wanted to put fear in our hearts. All right, they didn't want you to be great, and that's how it still affects us today. All right, we used to be thriving. In business ownership, and ownership in general. We had a lot of our own everything. All right, we had a lot of our own everything. We had way more businesses back then than we have today. And so that affects us because a lot of people are traumatized in starting businesses. And so we like to look at it as lazy. No, we've been through so much. And so it still affects us today, and we have to acknowledge that. And so this queen on the screen right here is Ida B. Wells. If you're not familiar with Ida B. Wells, she was a crusader, all right, an advocate during this period in time about the events that were taking place. Because you got all these melanin people being great. Why are they being attacked? Why are they being lynched? They're being lynched for being great. But see, they wouldn't say that. They would say that they were unaliving melanin people because they were committing crimes. Now, we're about to also get into how this lynching time period targeted melanin men and melanin boys. All right, it gets deep. And so Ida B. Wells realized that lynching is color line murder. She said lynching is color line murder. That all these lynchings were not happening because crimes were being committed. People were being lynched. Melanin people were being lynched because the Neanderthals were hating. They didn't want to share any power. They wanted to be in control. Kind of like today. And so she says that crimes against women is the excuse, not the cause. They would always say that every time after they lynched, especially melanin men, that his crime was assaulting white woman or a Neanderthal woman. All right, doing something to the Neanderthal woman. He breathed on her wrong. He looked at her wrong. It was always corny. And it was always an accusation. All right, so she's saying y'all not lynching nobody because they doing some crimes. It's about color, number one. Number two, you're trying to say that it's about crimes against women. That's just an excuse. It's not the cause. All right, so y'all check this out as well. All right, I'm showing you. Look, she goes in deep because she be giving you numbers. She give you the statistics, and then she also have a book that you can check out as well and do your own research. If you think I'm trying to spread hate or if you think I'm trying to cause division, I'm just out here to spread awareness and break it down for my people and my cousins. So if you still with me, cousins, and if you vibe, go ahead, subscribe. The Red Record: Statistics and Alleged Causes of Lynching. Okay? Now, if you dive deep in some of these stories, we about to talk about how it targeted melanin men. So this is where it's going to get sensitive, all right? This is where it's going to get a bit cringy. Okay? But we got to stomach this. So why I want to help y'all heal is that when you're healing, no one's going to be 100% healed, but we all need to strive towards healing, because when you heal, or when you're attempting to heal, you're not easily triggered. Okay? I don't want to go too much in this video, because y'all, we be here all day, because I love you. I love my cousins that much. And I could go on and on about a lot of events in history and break it down for y'all. And especially going in on this topic, because it's disgusting. This is a postcard. But we got to learn how to stomach this. And you can go into Google right now and type in lynching, and you'll see a whole bunch of stuff. But see, they don't want to talk about this, and they want to keep us sensitive and keep us sensitive to this type of stuff, because they don't want you being like, they want you to be like, why we gotta go back so far? Like, it's the past, all this and all that. They want you to do that because they don't want you to get to the point where you can stomach this and elevate from this. All right, elevation and activation is going to happen in divine timing. All right, some of you all may not be ready to activate and elevate at this moment. So I may be just speaking to my cousins out there that it's happening, or it's about